What's going on, guys? This is DaWoblefet. Last year, I posted a video going over what I thought was the longest turn 1 possible in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, clocking in at 24 minutes, 7 seconds. However, since then, I've developed an improved setup that optimizes the amount of time I waste in several key areas. My new setup includes several new Pokemon, with the most important change being the addition of Ditto. Ditto is extremely useful for several different reasons in this setup. By controlling which Pokemon is across from Ditto, I can have Ditto become different species at different parts of the setup. To start, I'll be copying this Mankey, which knows both U-turn and Beat Up. It's not an exact copy though. As you likely know, transforming into a Pokemon doesn't copy its HP stat. I need Ditto's HP to be pretty low, so the opposing Smeargle Stone Axe will deal more than half, but less than 3/4 damage with Stone Axe. In addition, because Ditto is only level 62, even though it has the same attack stat as Mankey, it will deal less damage with U-turn, since a Pokemon's level is factored in during damage calculation. In addition to Mankey, I also have a Slugma with the move Stealth Rock. Slugma is useful because it has a very bad defense stat and the weak armor ability, which will be used to waste a good chunk of time with Beat Up. Because Stealth Rock doesn't require a target, and Slugma's not the one terastallizing, I won't actually need to select Stealth Rock. Timing out will force the game to auto-select it for me. Since I can, I'm going to be doing a fun little glitch while I'm timing out too. If you attempt to switch in a Pokemon that's already in the battle, it comes up with a message telling you that. However, this dialog box doesn't close on its own when timing out, which leads to a funny visual effect. To start things off, both Mankey and the Ditto copied by Mankey will terastallize. These Pokemon speed tie, so whichever Pokemon terastallizes first will be random and doesn't affect my setup. Smeargle makes the first move of the game with Stone Axe, which will deal somewhere between 50 to 75% damage, specifically so Ditto will be able to switch in once successfully, then feint later. Slugma also sets up Stealth Rock on the opposing side. The opposing Mankey needs to win the speed tie by using Beat Up first here, which will now hit 6 times, activating weak armor to drop defense and increase speed each time. You might think I should have chosen a Pokemon that takes super effective or not very effective damage from Beat Up to waste even more time. However, only the Slugma line and Skarmory get access to weak armor and Stealth Rock. But even if that wasn't the case, it turns out that multi-hits like Beat Up, Icicle Spear, and Population Bomb don't actually say if their attack was resisted or super effective for each individual hit. So the weak armor Pokemon's type doesn't matter. A 10-hit Population Bomb would be better than a 6-hit Beat Up, but no Pokemon gets both Population Bomb and an ability that activates in response to Intimidate. Mankey has Defiant, which ended up wasting more time than a 10-hit Population Bomb when I compared the two. I prepared this Beat Up to deal over 75% of Slugma's HP without KOing it, so I'll be able to KO Slugma off later. With all the Beat Up completed, Eject Pack switches Slugma out. As you can see, I have 4 Masquerain in the back, each with Intimidate and Eject Pack. If you watched my last video, you'll remember that I used Sticky Web to loop through all of these Eject Packs. Instead of that strategy, I'm going to instead be playing Masquerain Ping-pong with the opposing player. By using Masquerain's Intimidate, I can force the opponent's Eject Pack to activate, bringing in their own Masquerain with Intimidate, which will activate my Eject Pack and repeating the loop. Not all of the Masquerain are the same though. 3 of the Masquerain have the most HP possible that a Masquerain can have at 344 HP, but one of the Masquerain has 1 off max at 343. This odd HP Masquerain will be useful for using Intimidate more than once. The order that my Masquerain are in also matters. By controlling the order the Masquerain start the battle, I can switch them in and out in a particular order to set up a nice situation later, where I can just let the game time out to complete the pending switch. For now though, I have to manually time this initial switch in of the Masquerain in slot 6. Masquerain comes out, shiny of course to take extra animation time from playing the Sparkles, takes Stealth Rock damage to leave it at 50% HP, and activates its Intimidate. This will cause a stat drop animation to play on both opponents, and for Defiant to activate on Mankey, increasing its attack stat. Even though Defiant just raised Mankey's stats, it did still lower them first with Intimidate, so it would ordinarily be eligible to switch out with Eject Pack. However, Smeargle is also holding an Eject Pack, and when 2 Pokemon are holding Eject Pack, and both affected by a stat drop at the same time, only the fastest Pokemon will switch out. Smeargle is faster here than Mankey, so it'll always be the one to use its Eject Pack first in this situation. In a similar way to what I just did on my side, we'll now be waiting on the opponent to switch in their first Masquerain. While we wait, I want to talk about a few potential candidates for time-wasting optimizations that don't end up actually making a difference. You can see the nicknames for all my Pokemon are just the same character used over and over again. It turns out the game doesn't actually take any extra time to play a 12-character nickname versus a 1-character nickname, so the long names are just for fun. You might notice the impact of longer nicknames in a single-player experience if you reduce the text speed in your game's options. However, that doesn't affect battles with other players, which always uses the fast text speed option, even if both players have slow text speed on. We finally got our first Masquerain on the opponent's side. Thanks to Ditto having copied Defiant from Mankey, it gets to waste extra time from Intimidate dropping its attack stat too. Just like before with Smeargle, Masquerain is set up to be faster than Mankey, and by extension, the Ditto that has copied Mankey. So Masquerain will always be the one to switch out here. I'll be going into my odd HP Masquerain next, and these loops will continue for a while as I ping-pong back and forth between my Masquerain and the opponent's. If you'd like, you can skip ahead to the timestamp on your screen to when I'm finished with the first part of the Masquerain loops. On the opponent's side, a Masquerain is coming out that's already at 50% now, just to KO it and end the loops a bit early. I don't want to use up all my eject packs yet, so I can do a ping-pong with Ditto's eject pack a bit later. Now, about 14 minutes into the battle, Ditto can finally use U-turn into the opposing Mankey. It picked up 3 attack boosts from Defiant earlier from all those Intimidates, so it deals a lot of damage with U-turn, putting the opposing Mankey into KO range of Stealth Rock for later. U-turn's damage is the most important reason why Ditto has to be a lower level. If Ditto was level 100, even if the opposing Mankey has the highest HP and defense stats possible, and the lowest attack stat possible, U-turn would still easily KO. So there's a tricky relationship between Smeargle, Ditto, Mankey, and Slugma. Smeargle needs to deal between 50 to 75% damage to Terrabug Ditto, but Ditto's defense stat depends on Mankey. But Mankey's defense stat is important to take less damage from U-turn. Mankey's attack stat is also important to take less damage from U-turn, but it needs to deal enough damage to Slugma too with Beat Up, but not so much damage that it faints. This dependency relationship with damage was really tricky to solve, but I'm glad I was able to come up with a solution in the end. Mankey's U-turn has put us back on the Switch screen again, and as you can see, we've already used up most of our team's HP by this point. Fortunately, 1 extra Masquerain is all I need. As Masquerain is sent out, it unfortunately only gets to intimidate Mankey, since the other slot has been KO'd. However, despite Mankey's Defiant giving it an attack raise, it will still switch out via its eject pack, because its stats were still lowered in the interaction. Like on my side, there is one last healthy Masquerain waiting in the wings on the opponent's side. While we're waiting for that to switch in, let's go over a few optimizations I was recommended on my last video that would not end up helping out in this setup. One of these would be doing this setup in a multi-battle. The advantage of doing a multi-battle is that all 4 players can terrestrialize during the turn, which means that you have to sit through extra terrestrialization animations. However, a major downside of multi-battles is each player can only bring 3 Pokemon to the game. Since you can't switch to your allies' Pokemon, it means you're much more limited in the control you have over the order Pokemon come in at different parts of the battle, which ultimately will limit the number of times you can switch in one turn. Another potential change you might consider is the trainer's Pokeball throwing style. In the Blueberry Academy DLC, you can unlock the ability to change your Pokeball throwing style in the clubhouse from the default baseball style throw to another variant. However, these throwing animations are purely aesthetic and don't impact the amount of time it takes for a Pokemon to be sent out. Getting back to the battle, the opposing final healthy Masquerain has now switched in. Like usual, it will activate Intimidate and force me back out to the switch screen. This time, I will be sending in Ditto, and using Ditto to copy the opposing Masquerain. The advantage of using Ditto here is that it takes less damage from Stealth Rock than the Masquerains would, so I can control sending it in at a later point in battle. Once I've done this, the only Pokemon that will still have an eject pack remaining is Ditto itself. And while we're waiting for that to happen, I'll touch on one more additional theoretical improvement, using Metronome. Like I talked about last video, Metronome could theoretically improve the amount of time the turn takes slightly by causing an extra animation to play for each move that I use during the turn. However, it could actually do a bit more than that. If I could somehow control which move Metronome calls and which Pokemon is targeted, I would unlock the ability to use different Pokemon as well, since a lot more Pokemon get Metronome as an option. I would be able to use Stone Axe instead of Stealth Rock on the weak armor Pokemon, and I would also have access to something other than Smeargle. Smeargle's Moody will activate later during the end of turn effects, but it's only a few seconds. I can't use Defiant like I do with Mankey, because Smeargle isn't on the field long enough to benefit from all those extra animations we get from stat drops causing Defiant to activate. Of the 122 Pokemon that learned Metronome in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, there are 112 unique abilities available among them. However, most of those will not actually be useful abilities, much less ones that I can loop multiple times. Probably the best option of the bunch is Power of Alchemy. I can use Power of Alchemy to take over an ally's ability when it faints, so I could copy Intimidate, which could mean the opponent could have 4 Masquerain that will faint from 2 rounds of Stealth Rock, instead of needing to save 1. I could also have the weak armor Pokemon that's using Stone Axe via Metronome deal enough damage to the new mystery option to KO it instead, and then modify the setup accordingly. A new ability is about all the extra benefit I'd get, though. Metronome can't actually call Population Bomb, so I can't improve on the number of hits that beat up does. All in all, even if I could control Metronome, it'd probably only add about 30 to 60 seconds realistically in the battle. Speaking of 60 seconds, though, that's about how much time is left on the game's 20-minute timer. However, we are nowhere near done yet. The next thing that will happen is Smeargle getting sent out, and we finally reached the end of turn effects for the battle, so Moody can activate to raise and lower Smeargle stats. At this point, the only thing left to do is to wait for all the remaining pending switches to resolve. This is where the largest improvement to my previous setup comes in. Previously, both trainers were replacing their fainted Pokemon at the same time. This new setup limits the amount of Pokemon fainting, so all of the opponent's Pokemon will faint first, then all of mine will faint, giving more switching opportunities in total. This will understandably take a while, so if you'd like, feel free to skip ahead to the timestamp on your screen to see how the battle finishes. From the start of turn 1 when move selection is possible, to the start of turn 2 when move selection is possible, this improved setup causes turn 1 to last for an impressive 30 minutes, 49 seconds. This beats out the setup I did last year in Scarlet and Violet by over 6 minutes, and beats out the setup in Sword and Shield by over 10 minutes. I want to give a special shout out to Karthik for helping me once again with this ridiculous experiment, by being available to bounce ideas off of and to test earlier variations of the setup. Until next time, have a good one.